I slammed the door on the man who raised me, my hands shaking as my son stared up in fear, because the truth he brought with him threatened to destroy the life I had rebuilt from nothing. My name is Ethan Cole, and years ago, I was the man everyone believed was a monster. It started with love, the kind that feels safe until it quietly rots beneath the surface. Sophie Hart was everything I thought I wanted. Someone who made the world feel steady during my final years in college. Someone I trusted enough to plan a future with. And that was exactly why it hurt the way it did when I found out she had been cheating on me. I remember confronting her late one evening. Around 8 p.m., my voice trembling as I asked her who he was, and instead of denying it or even breaking down, she panicked in a way I didn't understand at the time. Within days, whispers turned into accusations, and before I could even process what was happening, she had told nearly everyone we knew that I had raped her. The word spread faster than truth ever could, and suddenly I wasn't Ethan anymore. I was a label, a stain that no one wanted near them. The police took me into custody while they investigated, and I kept thinking that logic would win, that facts would matter. But by the time they admitted there was little to no evidence. The damage had already been done. My parents didn't wait for answers. They disowned me before anything was proven. And even after the investigation ended without charges, they still looked at me like I had escaped punishment by luck rather than innocence. My friends disappeared one by one, conversations turning into silence. And the college I had worked so hard to get into barred me from attending classes, only allowing me to complete coursework through email and show up for exams like I was some kind of ghost they tolerated. The loneliness was suffocating, and the worst part wasn't the hatred. It was the absence of anyone willing to even ask for my side of the story. The only person who didn't turn away was Marcus Reed, my best friend, who helped me in secret, slipping me money, checking in on me, reminding me that I wasn't crazy for believing I didn't deserve this. Eventually, I reached a breaking point, and one morning at 6 a.m., I packed what little I had and left that town behind without saying goodbye to anyone except Marcus. I worked whatever jobs I could find, community work, odd labor, anything that paid enough to keep a roof over my head. And slowly, I began to stabilize. Not emotionally, but at least financially enough to survive at some point. I decided to change my name. Not because I thought it would erase what happened, but because I couldn't stand hearing the old one anymore. It felt like it belonged to someone who had died. Starting over didn't magically fix anything, but it gave me space to breathe. And when I enrolled in a new university despite being buried in debt and barely scraping by, I told myself it was the last chance I would give my life to mean something. I studied teaching, not because it was easy, but because I wanted to build something good in a world that had shown me its worst. And when I finally graduated, I made a decision that scared me more than anything else. I moved across the world to a place where no one knew my past. That's where I met Lena Cole. And at first, I couldn't even let her touch me without flinching, my body reacting before my mind could catch up. But she never pushed, never demanded explanations. She just stayed, patient in a way I didn't think people could be. Over time, I fell for her in a way that felt terrifying because it meant I had something to lose again. But she proved, day after day, that she wasn't going anywhere. We built a life together, one that felt almost unreal compared to where I had come from. And when she gave birth to our twins, Noah and Mia, I remember holding them and thinking that maybe, just maybe, I had finally outrun the past. We settled into a quiet rhythm, a home filled with laughter, small routines, and the kind of love I had once believed was gone forever. And for a while, it truly felt like my old life had been buried for good. That illusion shattered last night at 7 p.m. when a knock on the door brought everything crashing back, and standing there on my doorstep was Father, looking older, smaller somehow, but still carrying the weight of everything he had done. For a moment, I couldn't breathe as I stared at him, the same man who had turned his back on me when I needed him most, now standing on my doorstep like a stranger asking to be let in. He tried to smile, a weak, uncertain expression that only made something inside me snap, and before he could say more than Ethan, please, I slammed the door so hard it echoed through the house. Making Noah flinch beside me, I immediately knelt down, forcing my voice to steady as I told him everything was okay, even though my hands were trembling so badly I could barely guide him to his room. And when I called out for Lena, my voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard in years. She came in from the garden with Mia in her arms, her face shifting from confusion to alarm the second she saw me, and I told her quietly to take the kids upstairs, to keep them distracted, anything to keep them away from what was unfolding at the front door. Meanwhile, Father kept knocking, not aggressively, but persistently. Each knock feeling like a hammer against everything I had tried to rebuild. I broke down right there in the hallway, the pressure of years collapsing onto me all at once, and Lena didn't hesitate. She wrapped her arms around me, grounding me in the present, whispering that I was safe, that he couldn't hurt me anymore. When the knocking didn't stop, she pulled away, her expression shifting into something fierce, and before I could protest, she went to the door and opened it herself. I stayed back, frozen, listening as she asked, "Who are you and why are you here?" And when he answered, "I'm his father." I could hear the anger in her voice immediately as she snapped, "You mean the father who abandoned him when he needed you the most?" Her words hit harder than anything I could have said, and for a moment, there was silence, as if even he didn't expect to be confronted like that. Eventually, the tension settled just enough for me to step forward, my chest tight as I told Lena to let him in, but to go upstairs afterward and stay with the kids. And she hesitated, clearly unwilling to leave me alone with him, but she trusted me enough to nod and walk away. Standing across from him in my own home felt surreal, like two versions of my life colliding in a way that didn't make sense, and he looked around briefly before focusing back on me, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. He began explaining, his voice unsteady, that he had recently been helping Sophie Hart with her phone, saying she asked him to clear out unnecessary files and messages, and while doing so, he came across conversations between her and the man she had cheated on me with. According to him, those messages revealed everything. Her guilt, her admission that she had lied about me, that she had ruined my life out of fear, and that she wanted to take it all back. He said he didn't confront her immediately because he didn't know how to face the situation. But from that moment on, he started searching for me, determined to tell me that he believed me. I remember staring at him, trying to process his words, but instead of relief, all I felt was exhaustion, like the truth had arrived far too late to matter. "So now you believe me?" I asked, my voice flat, and he nodded, tears forming in his eyes as he admitted he had made a terrible mistake, that he should have trusted me, that he should have stood by me instead of casting me aside. He said he had told Mother about what he discovered, and that she was devastated, desperate to contact me. But he had chosen to come alone first, to face me himself. None of it felt real, not because I doubted what he was saying, but because it didn't change anything that had already happened. The years I spent alone, the nights I questioned my own worth, the way I had to rebuild myself from nothing. None of that could be undone by an apology, no matter how sincere it sounded. I told him I needed time, that I couldn't give him an answer right then, and he didn't argue, just nodded and said he was staying in a nearby apartment, that I could come see him when I was ready. After he left, the house felt different, like the past had seeped into the walls. And later that night, as I sat on the couch with Lena, I told her everything I hadn't before. The full story, the accusations, the abandonment, the pain I had buried for so long. She listened without interrupting, her hand resting over mine, and when I finished, she simply said, "Whatever you decide, we face it together." And for the first time since Father showed up, I felt a small sense of control return. But even with that, my mind was racing, torn between anger, curiosity, and something I didn't want to admit, the possibility of closure. That night, sleep never came, and by 3 a.m. I was still sitting in the dark, staring at nothing while my mind replayed every moment I had tried so hard to forget. By the time the sun rose at 6 a.m., I had already made a dozen different decisions in my head, only to question each one minutes later. And when Lena found me still awake, she didn't push me for answers. She just placed a cup of coffee in my hands and asked quietly, "What do you need right now?" I didn't have a clear answer, only fragments of thoughts. Anger at Father for believing a lie so easily, confusion about why he was still in contact with Sophie Hart after everything, and a deep unease about how he had even managed to find me halfway across the world. I told Lena everything that didn't sit right with me, how strange it was that he had access to Sophie's phone, how he claimed he stumbled upon the truth by accident, and how none of it felt clean or simple, and she nodded, agreeing that something about the situation felt off, but reminded me that regardless of how messy it was, I still had control over what happened next. I spent the rest of the morning walking aimlessly through the streets, trying to clear my head, weighing my options like they were equations I could solve if I just thought hard enough. One part of me wanted to slam the door on Father permanently, to protect the life I had built and ensure that no trace of the past could ever reach my children, while another part wondered if hearing everything out might finally give me the closure I had been missing all these years. By the time I returned home around 11 a.m., I realized there was no perfect answer, only a choice I had to live with, and later that afternoon, I made my way to the apartment Father had mentioned. When he opened the door, he looked like he hadn't slept either, his eyes tired but hopeful, and for a brief moment, I saw not the man who abandoned me, but someone weighed down by regret. I didn't sit down, didn't accept any offer of water or small talk. I just told him plainly, "I'm not here to reconcile," and the words hung heavy in the room as he slowly nodded, his expression shifting into quiet acceptance. He didn't argue, didn't try to change my mind. He simply said he understood, that he had no right to expect forgiveness after what he had done, and for the first time, I believed him. He explained that after discovering the truth, he had told Mother everything and cut Sophie off completely, though he admitted that Sophie had tried to stay connected to the family out of guilt, something I found hard to believe but didn't care enough to challenge. He said Mother had taken the news badly, that she wanted to reach out to me immediately, but he had stopped her, believing it should be his responsibility to face me first. I listened without interrupting, not because I was moved, but because I wanted to hear it all once. To close that chapter properly. When he finished, there was a long silence, and I realized I didn't have anything left to ask. No questions that would bring me peace. No answers that could undo what had been done. "I built a life without you," I finally said, my voice steady. "And I'm happy. I have a wife, kids, a home. And I'm not willing to risk any of that. And he nodded again, tears slipping down his face as he whispered, "You deserve that." Before I left, he asked if there was anything he could do, anything at all to make things right. And I told him the only thing I wanted was distance. For him and Mother to stay out of my life, to let me keep what I had fought so hard to build. And he agreed without hesitation. Walking out of that apartment felt lighter than I expected. Not because everything was resolved, but because I had finally taken control of a situation that once controlled me. When I got home, Noah ran up to me, asking who the man from the night before was. And for a split second, I froze, unable to bring myself to tell him that it had been his grandfather. So instead, I said it was a colleague, a simple lie that I told myself I would correct when he was older, when he could understand the complexity of what had happened. Life slowly returned to normal after that, but something had shifted inside me, not broken, just settled, like a storm that had finally passed, leaving behind a quiet I hadn't known before. For a while, I thought that was the end of it, that closing the door on Father had finally sealed off the past for good. But life has a way of reopening wounds when you least expect it. And a few months later, that fragile sense of peace was tested again. It started with a message, indirect and unexpected, one that confirmed a promise had been broken. And suddenly, everything I had tried to keep at a distance came rushing back. After days of wrestling with the idea, I made a decision that surprised even me. I would go back, not to reconcile, but to confront everything face to face and finally put it to rest on my own terms. The flight felt longer than it actually was, my thoughts looping endlessly. But when I landed and stood in that familiar place I had once fled from, I realized something strange. It no longer felt like home when I met them all together. Father, Mother, my brother Daniel Cole, and even Sophie Hart. I expected to feel overwhelmed. But instead, there was a detachment I couldn't explain, like I was observing a past version of my life rather than stepping back into it. Mother was the first to break, tears streaming down her face as she tried to apologize, her words tumbling over each other in desperation. But instead of comfort, I felt a quiet disgust, not loud or explosive, just a steady recognition that her regret came far too late. Father stood beside her, trying to calm her down, while Daniel was the only one who seemed composed, stepping forward to ask how I had been. But I cut him off immediately, telling him this meeting wasn't about small talk. It was about closure. I made it clear that I wasn't there to rebuild anything, that if they tried to follow me or force contact, I wouldn't hesitate to involve the authorities. And the seriousness in my tone finally made them understand that this was not a reunion. It was an ending. I asked them the question that had haunted me for years. Why they had abandoned me so quickly when even the police said there was no real evidence. And Father admitted they had panicked, that seeing me taken into custody shattered their judgment. But I didn't let that explanation sit unchallenged, pointing out that fear didn't justify abandoning their own son without even listening to him. When I turned to Daniel and asked why he never reached out, his confusion was immediate, and he insisted that he had tried countless times. Calls, messages, even attempts to send money, only to be met with silence. It was then that the truth came out. Mother had blocked my number on their shared plan, cutting off any chance of contact. And for a moment, I saw genuine anger flash across Daniel's face as he realized what had been done. But none of that compared to the final piece I needed to confront, Sophie. When I looked at her, I didn't feel love or even hatred, just a hollow curiosity as I asked why she had done it. And her answer was as weak as I expected. She said she was scared, that she never stopped loving me, that therapy had only deepened her guilt, and that she had stayed single hoping for a chance to apologize. The words sounded rehearsed, almost pathetic, and before I could respond, Father revealed something that shattered whatever fragile sympathy might have remained. He had seen messages proving she had been with multiple other men while I was gone. Sophie broke down then, crying, reaching for my hand as she begged for another chance, and in that moment, something inside me hardened completely. I pulled out my phone and began showing them pictures, not out of spite, but out of truth. Images of Noah and Mia growing up, their birthdays, their first day of school, Lena smiling beside me, our home, our life, everything I had built without them. I told Sophie quietly that this was the life she had destroyed for herself. And I told my parents this was what they had missed by choosing to believe a lie over their own son. For a brief second, I wondered if I had gone too far, but then I remembered the nights I had spent alone, and I knew I hadn't. The meeting ended not with shouting, but with silence, a final definitive break that left no room for misunderstanding. And as I walked away, I realized I wasn't carrying the weight of that past anymore. The strange part was that after everything was said and done, I didn't feel victorious or bitter, just calm in a way that felt unfamiliar but deserved, like I had finally taken back something that had been stolen from me years ago. Before leaving the country again, I made one more stop. I went to see Marcus Reed, the only person who had stood by me when everyone else disappeared. And when he opened the door and saw me standing there, his face lit up in a way that reminded me of who I used to be before everything fell apart. We spent hours talking, catching up on lost time, and I thanked him properly. Not just for the help he gave me back then, but for believing in me when no one else did, and he brushed it off like it was nothing. But we both knew it wasn't. That visit grounded me, reminded me that even in the worst moments of my life, there had been someone who chose not to walk away, and that mattered more than I had ever fully acknowledged. When I returned home, Lena greeted me with a quiet smile that said everything I needed to hear without words. And the moment Noah and Mia ran into my arms, I knew with absolute certainty that I had made the right choices, not just in what I left behind, but in what I chose to protect. Life settled again, more firmly this time, like the last loose thread had finally been tied off. And for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace with my past. Not everything ended in distance, though, because there was one relationship I chose to revisit carefully: Daniel. After learning that he had tried to reach out all those years, that he had been blocked from helping me without even knowing it, I couldn't ignore the possibility that he had been a victim of the same broken decisions that tore everything apart. It wasn't easy, and I hesitated more than once, but eventually, I allowed him to visit, setting clear boundaries, making it clear that this was not a second chance for the whole family, just a cautious step forward between two brothers who had been kept apart by lies. When he arrived, the tension was obvious, both of us unsure how to bridge years of silence. But it didn't take long for something familiar to surface. The same underlying connection that had always been there despite our rivalry growing up. Watching him meet Noah and Mia was unexpectedly emotional, seeing him soften around them, realizing that whatever had been broken between us might not be beyond repair after all. Still, I remained careful, not out of fear, but out of responsibility, because my children came first, and I wouldn't let anything threaten the stability they deserved. Over time, I learned something important. Closure doesn't always come from forgiveness, and it doesn't require reconciliation to be real. Sometimes, it comes from facing the past head on, saying what needs to be said, and then choosing to walk away without looking back. I had spent years thinking I needed answers to move forward, but in the end, what I really needed was to reclaim control over my own life, to decide who deserved a place in it and who didn't. Sophie Hart became nothing more than a lesson, a reminder of how quickly trust can be weaponized, and my parents became a chapter I chose to close, not out of hatred, but out of self-respect. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that the people who stand by you when it's hardest, the ones who don't turn away when things get ugly, those are the people who truly matter. And sometimes, the family you build is stronger than the one you're born into. So if you've ever been in a place where it felt like the world turned its back on you, just know that your story doesn't end there. You still get to decide what comes next, and you can build something better, something stronger, even if you have to start from nothing. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Because your support means more than you know and helps stories like this reach others who might need them.